we call it now kingdom investing, is making investments that are rewarded in the kingdom. We were saying, how could we find companies that are early onset where 100,000, 200,000 is a game changer for them, but that gives us more skin in the game so that we can leave a legacy and pay off our debt as much as possible and pass down to the generation churches and leaders and business entrepreneurs.
A pastor turned tech leader and a millennial churchgoer explore the intersection of technology, culture, and faith, equipping you with innovative strategies to support you as you live out your calling, lead your churches with confidence, and step into the future together. This is the Give It Up Podcast. Welcome back to another Give It Up Podcast episode, and we're coming at you from virtual room number, how many is this? I don't know, Vance, because we're just so excited bringing all of our friends onto the show. What I love, Vance, is how many friends we have that have unique, innovative perspectives on so many different things within the faith space. And our friend Adam Mesa certainly has hot takes for us today.
So good. I'm so excited. Adam, thank you so much for joining us. If people don't know, Adam is a pastor at an incredible church in Rancho Cucamonga. I actually have my Rancho shirt on. I think this is my Rancho.
That's Rancho vibes.
Rancho
vibes. Yeah.
Southern California. The lead pastor taken from his dad, who y'all planted this church, 30 years ago?
Just about 29 years this year. So next year will be 30 years. Yeah.
29 years, had thousands and thousands of people this past Easter, and even just on a regular basis for decades have been making an incredible community impact. And now starting to become a national impact, always been nationally recognized, but just the models that you guys are setting up with neighborhood church and things like that I'm following, that I'm learning from, and things like that. Also, if you don't know, Adam is a prolific investor, not just on the basic apps like Robinhood and stuff like that. This man is investing into technology at the earliest stages, and that's one of the reasons why we met. We met at a random conference at a random ranch. Bob Goff may or may have not been involved. Nice shoes may or may not have been involved. A Lakers jersey and a Lakers cap may or may not have been involved. But we had connected ever since then, maybe a couple years ago now, Adam.
Yeah, and 2 years now at this point.
And I'll self-proclaim it, besties ever since. So
yeah,
it's so good to have you on the pod. You want to say a quick hi, and then we'll get into some of the topics.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much. I'm a big fan of Overflow, user of Overflow, listener of the podcast. And so I appreciate Vance so much. I believe he's a trailblazer. The moment I met him, I was like, this guy is my guy. And I'm actually a really quiet guy normally. So we just kind of, when we met at this gathering, we beeline to each other. And I was like, man, this guy really is going to change the world. You hear people say it and you go, okay. And then you meet Vance and you go, yeah, no, he's really going to impact the world. And so, and the whole Overflow team, I mean, it's just absolutely most impressive people I've ever met. So I'm excited to pastor. I'm excited that, I'm in business and everything like that, but I love the people I get to work with more than anything. I think that's the biggest blessing. Period, both in the secular industry, business industry, but also in the church. So I love it.
So good. Well, we're going to get into tech. We're going to get into investing. But before that, I want you to give just our listeners just an insight into everything that God is doing through your church, through Abundant, everything that's happening in Rancho and beyond. Maybe give a quick synopsis, because you all have had such an incredible impact in the community.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things so like Vance said, we're going 30 years next year as a church. We just shared with our church that at the end of this year, 2023, my dad will officially step into a new role in a new season. So he and I have been doing this transition for 6 years, and it's been a great transition. And, he's transitioning one of the largest churches in America, just like many of the other churches that we're seeing today that are transitioning to, mostly millennials nowadays. And so we've been doing this for 6 years. It was supposed to be a 10-year plan. We decided to do 7. COVID was kind of, for us, a healthy force multiplier. I know for others it wasn't. But for us, it was a healthy force multiplier for my leadership, for me and our church. And so it also gave us a chance to launch a lot of vision that we had kind of laid dormant that we were hoping to release. And so some of those things were like a network of churches, which is more like a family that does like discipleship and community with other pastors. And so we're going to probably launch this at the end of the year, called Abundant Network, but we call it, the actual like namesake of it is neighborhood church. And so we believe churches should impact the neighborhood. I would always grow up with people saying that we're going to change the world, but they can't even change their block. And so we didn't really want to name a church after the world. We wanted to name a church movement after the neighborhood. And so we believe in zip codes, and so it's like impact your zip code and then let God do the rest from that point. And so we believe that kind of a neighborhood church movement could happen within our sphere, that reaches blocks, reaches streets, reaches neighborhoods. And then the impact could be global. Should we all join together, to do this together? It's not on any individual. And so we really want to mobilize. I want to mobilize the next generation to be church planners. We have more churches closing than ever. We have more vacant churches without pastors than ever. And so that's kind of, I guess you talk about entrepreneur endeavor, kind of changed looking at my eyes more in the church sphere because I spent the last decade in the business world and marketing and investment, all that stuff. And we're going to continue to do that stuff. But I really got my eyes set on, I want communities to have churches that labor with their community. And so we also have a generosity center. So each of our campuses, one of our main points is we believe every church that becomes a neighborhood church should have some type of center where they meet the physical needs of the community, hands and feet of Jesus. And so we have 2 campuses right now of our own, and both have what we name them generosity centers. And so last year we gave out 1.5 million pounds of food to 291,000 people last year alone. So that's our heart. That's what we hope to continue to do. We hope to teach other churches how to do that. And so we have great relationships with Costco, Sam's Club, Stater Brothers, Albertsons, you name it. A lot of them are our main financial donors. The financial equivalent of how much stuff we get donated annually is $2 to $3 million worth of food and produce. So, that's something we continue to hope to broaden our relationships with, to allow other churches to partner. So we support about 100 other churches that come to our locations, pick up food, and pass it out to their community, whether they're in, within 3 hours of us, we help support and get food out. So, yeah, those are just some of the things that we do in our local church setting.
The Abundant Network neighborhood model. And when I was following this on Instagram, even before you had posted about it, you told me about it when we were on a trip in Vegas together at another church conference. And from hearing your vision about it to now seeing it being implemented, what's been interesting is to see that you're implementing it actually in urban environments. Is that specific? Is that strategic? Is that going to be the model? Because it seemed like it was like in an urban environment, more like a Starbucks would be on that corner, but now you see a church on that corner. Is that intentional?
Yeah, definitely. So, for me, I'm always looking on like how do we solve problems? I know in the business sphere, that's like the first thing that they're always talking about. But in the church sphere, it's not that. It's kind of like, it's like, again, the church is always kind of behind the 8 ball and stuff. And so like I've been in many business settings like, hey, how do we solve a problem for X, Y, and Z? And then you go in the church sphere and it's not really like, how do we solve a problem? It's just like, how do we just keep doing what we've done for the past 60 years? It just, and it's not working, a lot of times. And you got this new generation, Gen Z and stuff. It's like doing stuff totally different. So for us, one of the problems I see is a lot of church planning is happening in what I call sexy cities, which are fine. Every city needs a church. Sexy cities are Hollywood, Miami, and those are important. It should happen. We just don't feel led to go to those kind of spaces, and maybe it would happen one day. What we really feel led to is going to places that have a majority of minorities, people of color in those communities, because those tend to be where church planning goes the least or the last, and resources go the least and last in that way. And so for us, we have a desire to look at analytics and go to places that need help, that need improvement, that we want the mayor of that city to see us as a blessing coming in that city, not the mayor going like, oh, here's another one coming, here's another church, and more like, no, we need you guys in this city. We have a crime issue, we have a poverty issue, we have a mental health issue, and we believe that's kind of where our church has been graced by God. And so there are other churches that are doing great works when they go to Hollywood and New York and stuff like that. And those are great places. Great. That's not really our thing that we feel led to. And so we want to be able to equip the minority church, Hispanics, African Americans, Asian Pacific, Polynesians, where there's a lot of those in a bunch of cities that don't always get reached, the best way, because they are culturally different. And so not saying I even understand all those cultures, but we want to make an effort to reach those cultures and reach those people. And a lot of times it comes by being a resource to those individuals. And so we really emphasize counseling at our church. We really emphasize something we call Forward, which helps people, even though you're saved, you may need to be delivered of certain addictions and habits.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff that comes with more minority communities that come with like alcohol addiction, drug addiction, domestic violence. Our church really tries to come in and like, how do we seek healing for that? How do we pursue the Lord in that? How do we allow God through various classes that we have, counseling sessions we do. So we want to be able to help other churches that come, hey, I want to be a neighborhood church. I want to do this. And say, how can we equip you to do these things like we have seen? And we see great health in our church for it right now.
So let's get real.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why this model has not been pursued historically at scale is because, the surface level analysis is that the business model doesn't work. Okay.
Correct.
So let's take the business model of a church, quote unquote. Largely is driven by tithes and offerings. So you plant a church in Scottsdale, you plant a church in New York, you plant a church in, some of these areas. It makes a lot of sense, right? Based on the demographic that you're reaching,
right.
You can even just plant a smaller church and still be a really viable community. Going into more of an urban setting, maybe a setting that socioeconomically is middle lower. How do you make that business model? Let's get to the brass tacks. How do you make that work?
I think it's a few things, and I could tell you, you could look up the statistics. We have a campus in Pomona, the city of Pomona. You can pull up the crime rate of Pomona easily. You could pull up the financial. It's not a safe city. Holt Avenue is one of the highest forms of prostitution in all of Southern California. You go to Holt Street on a Friday night, there's literally hundreds of prostitutes. At our church at Pomona, we bought a building, a Salvation Army that was about 80 years old. So all that to say, first of all, it takes an investment. So you need a church kind of our size who's going to actually be able to found a couple years, that's going to be able to, for a couple years, absolve part of that negative that's going to happen for that church. So for us, it has taken extraordinarily a short time, thank God, but it's taken us 3 years to actually not recoup all the money we put in, but for it to be financially completely sustained. And so the campus we have in Pomona, there is, even though we're paying a mortgage and other things like that, that campus completely takes care of all of its bills, 3 full-time employees, all salaries, everything like that. And so it's not a worry of ours. Our church from our Rancho campus, which is a minority church as well, we raised money on the front end, we sowed the seeds into it, and then from there, we launched it with about $500,000. And then now it completely takes care of itself 3 years later. And here's how we do it with those type of communities. Number one is people who retain a large amount of debt do not give. They don't tithe. They definitely don't tithe. More than anything, they may tip you during a season. And then outside of that, it's not going to be regular giving. So some of the first things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to enable courses and classes that teach people how to better manage their finances. So things like Financial Peace University and those sorts. The next one I think they do is called Legacy or something like that. And so you want to be able to immediately start talking about financial responsibility. We talk about giving every single week. Some churches, particularly I know those churches in the South, they don't talk about money at all. It's just, we know that you're going to give. There's a bucket at the back, or people just, they don't talk about it. They don't teach about it. Every week we have caveated 5 minutes in our service where we talk about finances. Now we don't talk about guilt give or anything like that. And we don't talk about false promises. We don't say that, if you give, God's going to give you it 100-fold. And if you give $100 by next month, God will give you $1,000. By no means do we do any of that stuff. We just talk about biblical financial responsibilities. We talk about how we have to be stewards of our money and how your dollar is a seed. Where you plant it, it will grow. If I plant my money every week into the liquor store, then what will grow of it? Alcohol addiction and everything else that follows it. If I plant my dollar in the church, then you'll see fruit of it. You'll see it in our programs. And so that's just number one. We're talking about money. We're being unabashful about it. We're talking about the importance of giving, and we're seeing people delivered of that money and that love of money. We call it, in our church saying, we call it that love of mammon, right? And so we talk about how we got to release that in generosity. The other thing we talk about is we use language that's relevant to today. So we talk about subscription at your church. Like if you have a Netflix subscription, gym membership, and all these other things like that, how much do you give monthly to your church per the value that your church is giving you? Now, for us, we do a lot of programs for our members, so they equate that really easily. We do forward. We talk about deliverance. We do counseling at our church. We do family programs. We do we do a food distribution center. So our people in that community, they see that really fast. And we don't have to have anyone that gives a lot. We just need enough of us doing our part. That's what we tell the church all the time. Like, we're not looking for anyone rich to come in here and give. What we are is looking for everybody who considers this home to do their part. So it's the conversations we're having in that space that you have to do different than when you're in, like you said, Scottsdale, Phoenix, much more places that are upper middle class to upper class where they get it. They just go, I'm just going to start giving, or all these things like that. We have to educate, but also our ministry matches what we're educating. The people are receiving, and every dollar that we ask to give, we show them where it goes. So if we're raising money for to improve the youth center, that thing's got to be done in the next 90 days to 6 months. Because a lot of people in the minority communities have gone to churches that have raised money, and then the pastor's gotten a bigger car, or it's gone towards something else. And so we go, hey, you could bet us to it. You give this money towards this project, we have it already set up. In the next 90 days to 6 months, it's going to be done. This isn't going to prolong over 3 to 5 years. And then they trust you with that, So we've seen it happen at our campus being a 90% minority church in Rancho, and then our other campus in Pomona, which is actually an impoverished city. Both have been financially in the positive for years now, in that sense.
That's brilliant. I just love how you took what many see as an obstacle as an opportunity for greater intentionality, right? And you saw this opportunity of, cool, this is the situation. How do we actually up our game? How do we up our resources? How do we up our education? How do we up our Bible literacy of what it means to be financially responsible, and what the Bible informs us of how we can be, as God's children, financially flourishing, right? Yeah. And I love what you said. That model, it works. It works because there's a couple things that needed to happen. Number one, you needed a sending house that did a seed investment, right? So that was critical to get it started, to give it enough runway so that you could mobilize the masses, right? And so you don't need, a few multi-million dollars even standing it up to be sustainable. No, you just give the church 12, 18 months worth of runway to do the education, to do the hard work, to do the financial freedom courses, so that it can become viable just through its own community that's contextual to that urban city. I love that, man. I love that.
Yeah. Because don't get me wrong. I mean, my natural flesh. I mean, I want to go to Irvine. I want to go into San Diego. But for us, we're like that's not our call. And I remember that historic thing that they asked Rick Warren, hey, why did you plan to plant Saddleback in Lake Forest in Irvine? And they thought it was going to be this, cloud of smoke came down. The Lord told me, he said, I got a magazine. I read an article that Irvine will be the next populated financial city, in all of America, and all families will be moving there by 2000 or whatever. And so he's like, I'll go there, where it seems like everyone's going and then where the economy is going. Right. And there's no shame in that. Those individuals need pastoring just like anyone else. And Rick Warren has built a legacy that has planted more church, I think, than anyone in history, from what I understand. So, and to me, he had to go to Irvine to be able to plant as many churches that he did and send off, because Irvine, like you said, acted as that hub, and that's always what we're trying to get our Rancho campus to understand, is this campus is a hub to future campuses. And the only way those will thrive is if we succeed here, and if we continually invest in the kingdom by planting other churches. We have to have that model is only successful as far as people are willing to buy in to that vision and believe that we are solving a problem, which is a kingdom problem for us,
So
I
good.
love that, Adam. I wanted to hit on this because Carey Nieuwhof recently on his show discussed this statistic that most church plants, when they go live, per se, it's 98% of people that are already churchgoers, and only 2% of people are actually brought in the doors. Now, I am assuming that what you're seeing in a non-quote sexy city, these statistics look a lot different. What does that look like for someone in Pomona, for instance? What are you seeing with people that have gone to church before, just bounced to yours, versus never entering the building at all?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is, so we're definitely, and again, I wouldn't know the exact statistic, but for at least for our Pomona campus, but from what I know, going over there and seeing and hearing the salvation stories, is there are and have been some people that have come from other churches, especially early on. We've been doing this now for about 4.5 years. COVID kind of, because we were meeting in a junior high. So then when COVID hit, we had like 1.5 to 2 years of like no church at that campus. Then we relaunched 2021 of Easter. So been open again now for 2 years. So that being said, majority of the people, because of what we have to do to evangelize and reach that community. And yes, there aren't a lot of churches in the city of Pomona. And if they are, they're extremely segregated. So most churches you'll get in that city are either going to be all black churches or all white churches. And so for us, and you go to our campus, it's completely diverse. Asians, Polynesians, Hispanics, African Americans. And so for us, what that comes down to is a place where we are reaching the community. So every Saturday, we're having that Generosity Center open. You could come and meet with your campus pastor for counseling anytime. And so we do 2 sessions of free biblical counseling, and you kind of get on a schedule. We do forward. So friends are inviting their friends in the community to these programs that we have. And through being the hands and feet of Jesus, they're being exposed to our church. And then they're being exposed to our neighborhood model, which our neighborhood model is, we have a saying at our campuses that says, we do life in circles, not in rows. So every week when we're on stage, we say, hey guys, today you're in a row, but this week you should be in a circle. And so that continues to emphasize that idea of inviting new friends. And we do salvation calls every single Sunday. So that's getting people really in the community to come. And so by no means, ours definitely wouldn't be the one Carey had done, but I'd be happy to go and check the actual statistic. As far as I can tell, if they were a churchgoer, they were a churchgoer 15 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, it was a lot. They didn't come like exactly church hop from that church to this church. And for us, we actually do video sermon. So right away, if you came from a church like yesterday who had live preaching, it is a bit of a culture shock because I'm the main teaching pastor, so I film every Saturday for our campuses. So immediately a church just another person that's leaving another church just looking for the next cool thing. We're actually not the next cool thing because there's a bit of a change and shift in your model of how you're receiving church. So you actually have to find value in how we're doing church and discipleship and how we're doing community in order to go past the hurdle of the teaching pastor. But we have a model that says if you receive the teaching pastor, that means you get your campus pastor full time. So that's kind of why we have chosen to go towards that model, because we understand in the minority community how much work that past campus pastor has to do to minister to that community. Now, if we were in a community where we didn't have to do all the programs we did, then live preaching could work. But for us, if I expect my campus pastor to spend 25 hours preparing a sermon and then spend 60 hours doing counseling and generosity center and everything else that we have doing, not only would I end and ruin his marriage, I would make his kids hate him at the same time. And so I refuse to do that stuff, put that pressure on it.
I love the intentionality of even how you craft, and I'm going to use business terms because part of our podcast is bridging business technology innovation with the church. How you define your product, so to speak, right? And so there is an elevation of being the hands and feet of Jesus. That's part of what you're going to find when you go to your church, right? And so even the way that you craft the roles and responsibilities for a campus pastor and lessening the load on even preparing 25 hours for teaching frees them up to actually deliver on the product that you want to deliver. There's this great book called Crossing the Chasm, and I find it so interesting. It talks about early adopters and that transition of early adopters to early majority. And I think there is sometimes this stigma with church planners of like, oh, you know what? Like we have to go into the halls of Stanford. We have to go to all the atheists and we have to go into the streets of San Francisco and we have to convert everybody to start the church. And the reality is like, we're trying to go for the high fruit to start when there's so much low hanging fruit. And so I actually think that a lot of times, what you'll find is that the early adopters are going to be displaced Christians that don't already have a home, right? And then once you get the early adopters to create that stability and that foundation, then you can progress to the early majority and then the rest, right? And so I think that's just generally probably permission for anybody that's listening to this that's early on in the church planning phase that, hey, that's not a wrong strategy. Actually, a lot of times that's how you start getting inertia and momentum. One thing that
if you release a new product, the first thing you want to do is you want people who are not plugged in with that, who are loose on another product, like you talk about like that private airplane company JSX, like they're trying to solve a problem for people who are sick of TSA security. So like they're already, they didn't create something new out of thin air. Like they're just trying to like slightly solve a problem. And so for me, I just want people to be plugged into their church. So sometimes I'll meet people in the street who used to go to my church and I'm like, hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. And they're like, oh, I started going to the church down the street. And I'll be like, oh, tell me why. And they're like, oh, because this is really what I needed in this season. Now, no one really wants to hear that, but the biggest part of me says, but if it makes you more plugged in than you were in my church, if it makes you more committed to your relationship with God, then I'm going to be okay with that. But if you're a straggler just like you were at my church, then that's probably a problem. But if this makes you more committed, then I want that to happen. So our church is a very large church. If someone goes to a church planner's church and they say, I like it because it's really, really small and everybody knows each other, there's nothing I can do to fix that, right. And so what I'm going to say is, man, I'm happy for you and I'm happy for that pastor. I'm not all of a sudden looking at that pastor's Instagram sideways or anything like that. I'm just like, man, I'm happy for you. It's great. I'm glad you found a place that you feel connected to.
I love that. I love that. We
Yeah.
we wanted to also ask you, Adam. Zoe and I were really impacted when you spoke at our company summit, really about your mindset in investing. Not even just from the church standpoint, but you personally. You were really early on one of the first checks into a technology company called Pray.com, which now has tens of millions of users really around the world. And you got in when there were like a couple users. I think you were like the first user.
Yeah, I really was. I was maybe like, besides the staff, the first human user
So I
outside
think
of
this is
staff.
just gonna break people's mental models on so many different wavelengths right here of like talk to us about your mentality around investing, but not just investing, super early stage investing, while also being a pastor and a shepherd and a church
Yeah.
leader. Because not only were you involved in investing, but also the church rallied behind it as well. Like, talk to us about this because this is going to blow people's mind. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that comes from, my dad grew up in East LA, and so he was a Mexican from Montebello, and my grandpa was a plumber, my great grandpa was a mechanic, and so, when you're never taught about financial responsibility and it's never really been exhibited to you in any way, I think really, part of that credit had originally come down to my dad, who, as you're pastoring a minority community, and you're trying to teach people around finance, but you're burying people and they can't even afford their funeral. Siblings are fighting over the gold ring that dad had because that was the most financially worth thing that he had was a $4,000 gold ring or $6,000 bracelet type of thing. And so for us, what I had seen, what was popular in more of the white evangelical church was this idea of leaving a legacy and financially paying things off. And for them, a lot of them had it in stocks, bonds, Roth IRAs, and stuff like that. Well, for us, we could do that, but then we thought to ourselves, well, if everyone else in tech right now is investing in these kind of these companies that are rising, why could we not do that on a kingdom sense as believers? And why could we not actually receive more with our little? Because we're kind of behind the eight ball. We're teaching financial literacy and all these things like that. And so we actually have to be able to do a lot with a little rather than having a lot and doing a little bit at a time. And so for us, what we found was early on companies in their infancy that we would evaluate were the best risk versus reward for us. And when I talk about little, in our little sense, it was 100,000, 200,000, 250,000. And so we were saying, how could we find companies that are early onset where 100,000, 200,000 is a game changer for them, but that gives us more skin in the game so that we can leave a legacy and pay off our debt as much as possible and pass down to the generation churches and leaders and business entrepreneurs. And so we have coined it, we call it now kingdom investing, is making investments that are rewarded in the kingdom. Now, that doesn't have to be necessarily a faith-based company. It just has to be in the way that what's going to continue to happen is we're going to continue to create a savings for our church that the next generation is going to be able to pull from, particularly for us, for church planning. That's our end goal, is that we're going to be able to set up these funds that have returning dividends that we can actually pull from or pull loans against to plant future churches without putting weight on people to continually do fundraisers and say, hey, could we raise $500,000? Could we raise $1 million? Well, what would happen if we had a fund that had $10 million in it that every single year we can pull a few $100,000 or pull loans against that will allow us to do that new campus or renovate that new space without the risk of, well, what happens if the economy turns in this way in that sense? Because we have value already set up in those accounts from the investments we made. So some of them are faith-based companies. Some of them are non-faith-based companies. Some of them are put into funds. And so what that does is number one, it looked for me, how do I leave a legacy for my children and my children's children? And then also, how do I ensure for our church that we're here? Because I think what a lot of people don't realize is for most minority churches, they will close down after one generation.
Wow.
After that Hispanic pastor or that Black pastor becomes 70, 80 years old and he retires, they did not set up their church for success. More so, it's more so in minority churches than it is in a white evangelical church. That exists too, but it's really heavy in the minority church. So for us, we just didn't want to be another statistic. And my dad would always talk about that. It's like, we're not going to be another statistic. We're not going to be that next statistic that closes our doors. We're not going to be that next statistics of African Americans, Hispanics who didn't know how to run their finances, who couldn't keep something for more than one generation. We're not going to be those people. And so with him, it started from him leading with the vision. And then I think with now his son being me, he led with the vision, and then I came in with more of that solution, being his son, that also had a background in marketing and in tech already. And so what had happened was before I met the guys at pray.com 2 weeks prior, I had a meeting at Facebook where I basically pitched to them pray.com as a feature in Facebook. And I didn't even know the Pray guys at that time. I said, hey, what would happen if you guys start to allow us to stream church services on Facebook? They weren't doing streaming at the time. I said, what would happen if you created these kind of rooms where churches could go and gather, and it could be like a digital small group? Facebook pages as like the little page where you can communicate and all, that didn't exist at that time. They created that as a result of pray.com becoming successful. And so I was already in the sense of like my head was set towards finding solutions. Then I met the Pray guys. They had a better model than I had in my head. And I said, hey, can we invest in this? I believe this is going to go somewhere, because I truly believe that it was a solution that was needed, as in even the first day that I met you, Vance. And I believed that giving stock in crypto was the future. And I remember a pivotal conversation I had with an African-American pastor who said, hey, I signed up for Overflow, and in 6 months, no one has given stock. And I said, here's what you have to recognize is in our minority communities, the average person, I think it's 60, or you may know this better than me, 60 to 65% of all stock in America is owned by white Caucasians. So only 30 to 40% of stock is shared amongst all other cultures. But we know majority of wealth is held in stock. So, what I was telling that pastor was, if we believe that financial stability for the next generation comes in the form of stocks and crypto and other things like that, well, then you have to be innovative enough to also view Overflow as you being a person building a foundation in your church to teach your young people, oh, you've never heard of stock? You never knew that you could give it? You don't even know what it is? Let us help you teach what it is, because most of the white people in America hold it and they're totally aware of it, and they're passing all these things down to their next generation. Why are we not doing the same? And then as churches, why are we not enabling these features so that in a generation or two, we've already had these features, we understand it, so that we can prepare them for success? So part of leading a minority community is also taking those steps of faith in education,
That is so mind-blowing. You just blew so many people's preconception out of the water with that. And what I am really loving and being encouraged by hearing you say, Adam, is how seriously you take investing and discipleship, and not just financial investing. Like, you are investing literal resources into these communities so that success looks different. It's not just I accepted Christ. It's no, my entire life and family generational lineage is now different because of the actual tools I've learned, as well as the spiritual tools that I have as well. And there's a statistic that Fidelity Charitable revealed last year, and it's that 67% of millennials consider themselves philanthropists. I would love to hear, because you seem like this exact type of person, the archetype of this person right here. But what are you seeing in your church communities about that statistic?
Well, I think what you're saying is I think millennials, from what I'm seeing, is millennials and Gen Z, they understand philanthropy in a greater sense. But here's what has to happen is what I've seen from the boomers and the silent generation, even some of the Xers, is the way they've understood the model of maybe philanthropy or church is they would just, in a sense, blindly give. So, okay, this is my church, so therefore I get it, 10% of my income, or whatever you want to say, right? This is what I give. Or, okay, the Girls and Boys Club, yeah, I'll give $1,000. I'll give whatever. Millennials and Gen Z are actually more so doing their homework as to where these things go and what's being done with it. And so you actually have to bring a lot more clarity. And that's what we've done in our church is we are seeing the generosity of millennials increase, but we actually, what I call, you have to peel back the curtain.
Yes.
You can't have a stage where you just give like a really good speech, or you just, give this, like, to me, these innuendos of like, we're going to change the world, right? That's what you would hear. It's like, we're change the world. And they're like, yeah,
revival.
Yeah. $10,000, like, look at this, look at this person, this, that, right? So for us, like, we just actually did a fundraiser at our church. It's our Vision Sunday. And we actually flew our missionary from Brazil, had her show pictures, had her architect do images of what our renovation is going to look like. And then we gave our church a timeline. In 90 days to 6 months, you will get a progress report from her with a video of these renovations being complete. Boom, the people started giving towards that. Because with millennials, you have to show them and be much more clear. This is what it's going to. This is how. So yeah, they're totally open to philanthropy, but not philanthropy of the previous generation that just puts, that you just have a Santa outside of a Target ringing a bell saying, "Hey, give something to Salvation Army." They're jaded off of that. They're saying, "Where does this dollar go, and whose life is it changing?" And I want to know that it's going to do that. Is that right, wrong, or indifferent? I don't know. It's just a new generation. So I can either keep doing the same models of what is done in the past, or I can do that little bit of extra work to say, no, we're gonna peel back this curtain, and we're gonna make it abundantly clear to them about where these giving increments are going, how it's changing lives, how it's impacting people. So I think any philanthropist or anyone willing to give in philanthropy is looking for those type of things.
Ladies and gentlemen, my friend Pastor Adam Mesa is just dropping wisdom bombs on the Give It Up podcast. So much insight. Maybe we title it something like this, Zoe, Pastors Solving Problems. Because this is the theme that I hear from my friend Adam here. And that's what it is, huh? Like, I sit in the seat of executive pastor. And in the last decade that we've been doing this and planting and building and growing the church, I've realized that theologically, there's like 3 to 4 hot questions. Where more of the questions come from is practicality. I got this financial crisis. These kids are driving me nuts. My marriage, all these things. It's the modern day pastor has to understand how to pastor people practically and how to point people to be able to solve real problems in their day to day. That's why I love preaching that doesn't just preach to your Sunday, but that can change your Monday, right? That's what we say at our church at Vive Church. And, everything that you're saying, even, breaking down your guys' mentality around investing, I found it so practical, right? You and your legendary dad, Pastor Diego, your whole family had this understanding that, hey, as a minority-based church, we don't start with maybe as much as others. We're not going to use that as a crutch, though. We're going to change the game. We are going to look from a different perspective. We might have to increase risk a bit more, but we're going to totally increase potential reward. But to de-risk that model, you're not just spraying and praying and throwing investment dollars into whatever. You're actually aligning it to problems you actually see in the market. And so it's not that you thought that, oh, cool, these pray.com guys are awesome, I'm going to invest. It was like, no. I've been thinking about this problem. I pitched this to Facebook. This is needed in the world. This is needed for the local church. We will be customers ourselves. And from that place, you made a strategic investment. You made a smart investment. This was an investment based on wisdom. And not every investment's going to work out. But if you're doing it from a place of solving a problem, if you're doing it from a place of personal experience, Warren Buffett says, don't invest outside of your core competency. Mm-hmm. And not everyone is going to work out, but if you continue to do that, it compounds over time into disproportionate returns for yourself and for your organization. And I just love that it all is with the mission of building the kingdom. I love how you position it. Would you say kingdom investing?
Kingdom investing. Yeah. Kingdom investments. That's just what we talk about in our meetings in water cooler talk. But that to us, that's what it is. It's kingdom investment. So we look at things that would investment that may not be faith-based, but for us, the faith-based ones are, how will this impact the kingdom? How will it grow the kingdom? And how is this person maybe not being seen by the secular industry or the secular world? We saw that with film, right? Like when War Room came out, that movie of the grandmother who prays. After that, almost every major studio in Hollywood opened up a faith-based division. And so, when you recognize that people of faith have a lot of potential to impact the world, Hollywood and the rest of the world around it is only going to come when they can make $1. And then that's always going to be their intention, is to make the dollar. It's not impact. That's not their goal. And so for us, we did that recently with a company that we helped. It was Christian ownership. And they said, we have board members that are not Christians. Yeah. We actually want an investor who's Christian because we're Christian, because we don't want the investors to turn our core belief system just off of the profit. If we have an investor that's also Christian, you will always be able to have a voice to keep our mission and our mandate on lane, because you have just as much skin in the game. And so it was individuals that are doing really well, but we came alongside so that we could be an active Christian voice. And I think that's what you need more of, is you need more believers who are coming alongside people of faith that aren't just, and I would always tell pastors this, like, if you have someone in your church starting a business, don't tell them you'll pray for them and then wait until they become millionaires to then start talking to them about tithing, right? Like, if you believe in them, then start walking that process with them right now. And if there's something that you can do, not, and it may not be financial, but it may be in relationships. It may just be in doing a weekly Bible study for them while they're building this company and they're too busy and stuff like that. Like, if you're a pastor, start sacrificing for the entrepreneurs in your church now, instead of just knocking on their door when you need a donation, because they need their pastor and they need a pastor. So they're going to need you. You may need them when it's donation season or building campaign season, but they need you all other days of the year. And so go be there for them in those times. And that's kind of what we've tried to do with Kingdom Investment, is to be a friend and pastor to those entrepreneurs who have a heart for the kingdom, but are out there, really, really building something that they feel led to build, whether they're in real estate, whether they're in tech or whatever it may be. We want to come alongside of them.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, because you're taking something that is typically, and can be in the church-based transactional to relational, right? You're investing in that person. And kingdom investing, I'll say this, let me maybe reduce the gap for some people mentally. This has been happening in the local church for centuries. It's just that the predominant investment that the church has made is in real estate, physical real estate. And that's something that I know Abundant does in a prolific basis as well. You guys have ranches, you guys have estates, you guys have a lot of business real estate.
Business complex.
Business complexes and things like that. So that is one part of your portfolio. But what I want to encourage people in is, in the time and place that we live in today in our society, it's not just about physical real estate. How are you deploying resources into digital real estate? And it doesn't just mean starting an Instagram profile, okay? Yeah, do that. Get some distribution. But how are you investing into innovation? How are you investing in the digital landscape? How are you this is the new real estate. And so it's not either or, it's both and. My goodness, Zoe, this was one of the best combos we've had yet. I love this.
Yeah, I'm feeling so encouraged, Adam. So thank you for sharing all this with us. And, you know, here's what I want to challenge. If you're a faith leader and you've listened to this and you're feeling that conviction of like, oh, I don't need to just continue on with the flywheel just because we know that it works. What if we just made our prayer, God, please open my eyes to finding unique problems in my community and give me the divine insight to create the solutions for it as well. Because that's how we impact the world, by first impacting our zip codes.
Come on.
Adam, thank you so much for being on the show. Give it up for Adam Mesa, everybody.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. So much fun.
Thank you.
Love you guys.